one of the things that startups, I'll say startups for a second, that startups miss a lot of times is the impact of marketing and branding, even for a 3-year-old startup, right, or small business. A lot of startups, small business, small to medium sized business are very, very focused on product and or service, right? So, a lot of times it's someone who's been doing something for a while, whether you were a photographer or you were a developer, or you have some kind of expertise that brought you into or birthed that organization, right? So now you were a photographer, now you have the photography business. You were a developer, now you've built an app that helps people find dumpsters, right? Whatever that is. Um, within that context, one of the things that they miss the impact of is the actual marketing and sales. They think that the product or the service should sell itself because it's a great product, it's a great service. I mean, I shouldn't have to explain to anyone. The inverse is true, right? And a lot of clients I work with, they become frustrated because a lot of times they look at the competitors and like, oh, my product is way better than that. What are they, especially with technology focused founders and owners, they're like, no, they're not using the right JavaScript and Python. And like because I understand that lingo, I go, yeah, but nobody cares. The end user only cares that they could order their school supplies, get the right picture, whatever that end product is. So the mechanics of it is really a you thing, right? So you do need to tell more of a story about why that product or service matters to your customer. Again, marketing, and then that translates into sales. On the other side of it, for larger organizations with Puma, for instance, they over-index on marketing and sales. And depending on how long the organization's been around, a lot of times they also ignore. They do a lot of marketing sales, but very I would say cookie cutter, right? And they're not, because of the size of the organization, they have huge barriers as it relates to being able to actually understand what's their audience or customer or end users actually the experience that it's had.
Right.
Amazon's famous for this because they've codified a way to always bring the customer experience, the customer's perspective to all the meetings. That's all the millions of meetings that they have in such a large organization. Puma is the same way that when I worked with them, that was one of their big things. They had a new market that they were working with that they didn't have as much data and didn't have as much relationship with. So as much as they had all the money to spend and they knew how to do marketing, they really didn't understand the mechanics of that customer, and they almost couldn't get out of their own way from a process perspective because they're like, oh, we're Puma. We've done this so many times. So let's just take what we've already done and it's worked in this market or this with this customer, and let's use that with this market or this customer. And so again, they over-index um on their reliance on the fact of what they've done before has worked. And as we know, audiences, markets, customers these days especially change so quickly. So large organizations they're not able to change and adapt as quickly. So that's their hurdle. Small organizations are able to change and adapt quickly, but they don't realize they don't have the systems, they don't also realize the importance of that customer market the impact on their business. So, that's kind of what I see. And, it's interesting to work with both because you kind of like, oh yeah, well, if you had your thoughts and if small organizations had the processes and the benchmarks that large organizations have, they do so much better. And then the inverse is true with if large organizations came out of their meetings and their tall buildings and came down to the ground level, they'll be more successful. So that's what I see.
Very, very well said. I totally agree with you on the smaller side, because people are like, yeah, I've got the best thing in the world. Why aren't people coming? I'm like, because nobody knows you exist. So if you don't have
Exactly,
your
exactly.
presence out there, it doesn't matter how great the product is, right? Because every Steve Jobs has every Wozniak has a Steve Jobs. Without Jobs promoting it, nobody knows
Exactly.
about it. So it's
Exactly.
always best.
And that's a great point what you're saying there, where, as much as a lot of smaller business owners know the stories about Steve Jobs, about Apple, about Amazon, somehow I haven't really run a business that's growing myself, but somehow they missed that part, to your point, where they're actually the Wozniak and you need a jobs, right? Or the reverse is true. Sometimes, like, you're a Steve Jobs, you don't know the technology, so you do need kind of those two minds, particularly for a large organization, and that accelerates your growth. If you're able to figure that out, if you're able to recognize that and figure out a system to now balance that out, all the large companies, Slack, Salesforce, I mean, you'll see that even Facebook, that's how they've grown. They've accelerated the growth. They've been able to balance that, outward, in this case, if you're using AI, what you're amplifying versus what you're optimizing, that also transforms your business. So
Mhm.
again, that process works regardless of your industry or the technology that you're looking to leverage.